Welcome to the April 28th Oshkosh Common Council meeting. Will you please call the roll?
Mugrower?
Here.
Erickson?
Here.
Peschel?
Okay, Bob, unmute.
I'm here.
Ford?
Here.
Allison Osby? Here. Krause?
Here.
Palmieri?
Here.
Present 7.
Next, Councilmember Mugrower will lead us in the invocation, followed by our Pledge of Allegiance.
We ask for guidance tonight as we begin this meeting. May all those who participate in our discussions and our decisions reflect the values that we cherish in this great city.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So we do have a proclamation this evening. We'll be handling this a little bit different. Councilmember Allison Osby will be receiving this proclamation on Older Americans Month, and I will read it and just slide it over to you. Whereas Oshkosh includes countless older Americans who enrich and strengthen our community, and whereas Oshkosh is committed to engaging and supporting older adults, their families, and caregivers, and whereas we acknowledge the importance of taking part in activities that promote physical, mental, and emotional well-being, no matter your age, and whereas Oshkosh can enrich the lives of individuals of every age by promoting home and community-based services that support independent living, involving older adults in community planning, events, and other activities, and providing opportunities for older adults to work, volunteer, learn, lead, and mentor. Whereas our community can provide opportunities to allow older citizens to continue to flourish by emphasizing the importance of elders and their leadership, by publicly recognizing their continued achievements, presenting opportunities for older Americans to share their wisdom, experience, and skills, and recognizing older adults as a valuable asset in strengthening American communities. Now therefore, I, Lori Palmieri, Mayor of the City of Oshkosh, do hereby proclaim the month of May 2020 as Older Americans Month in the City of Oshkosh, and urge every citizen to take time this month to recognize older adults and support them as powerful and vital citizens who greatly contribute to the community.
And on behalf of the Committee on Aging and under normal circumstances, we would have loved to have had somebody from the committee come and accept the proclamation this evening. So on behalf of them, thank you for acknowledging the important impact that our senior community or our people of aging have in the community, and especially a thank you to the city staff as well as fellow council members for their continued support of our citizens who are aging. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have the consent agenda, and I first wanted to just check with the clerk. Did we receive any comments from citizens on any consent agenda items?
No, we did not.
Okay, thank you. Back to council for motion and a second.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Bob, did you have anything from consent agenda?
Did not, thank you.
All right, thanks. All right, please take the roll.
Mugrower?
Aye.
Erickson?
Aye.
Peschel?
Aye.
Ford?
Aye.
Allison Osby?
Aye.
Krause?
Aye.
Palmieri?
Aye.
Carried 7.
Moving on to pending ordinances, Ordinance -20-184, amend various sections of the Chapter 30 zoning ordinance. Plan Commission recommends approval. And did we have any comments on this item?
No one is registered or no comments received.
All right, thank you. Back to council for motion and a second.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Mr. Davis, if I could ask you to just maybe give some highlights on this. Are we just kind of doing some cleanup on some of the newer zoning ordinance?
All these are in regard to projects that are in the pipeline or have been through the pipeline, and we saw some errors in our zoning code, so we're bringing our zoning code into compliance with what we think development should look like in Oshkosh. So all these projects are landscaping, parking, how much parking is required, all those things have to do with current site plans that we've been shown that they don't work in every situation, so we're figured out a way to make sure they work at least the situations we're aware of.
All right, thank you.
Mhm.
All right, if we can please call the vote on 2184.
Mugrower,
Aye.
Erickson,
Aye.
Peschel,
Bob, are you here? He gave a thumbs up. All right.
Peschel,
Present.
Ford,
Aye.
Allison Osby,
Aye.
Krause,
Aye.
Palmieri,
Aye.
carried 6, 1 present.
All right, moving on to new ordinance 20-185. Amend rules pertaining to council, board, and commission meetings in response to COVID-19 coronavirus emergency. Staff recommends waiving the rules and adopting on the first reading. Did we have any comments come in on this item?
No, we did not.
All right, so we would bring that back to council for motion on waiving the rules.
I move that we waive the rules and adopt on first reading.
Second.
Any discussion on waiving the rules on the first reading? All right, please call the roll.
Mugrower,
Aye.
Erickson,
Aye.
Peschel,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Allison Osby,
Aye.
Krause,
Aye.
Palmieri,
Aye.
carried 7.
And back to council for motion and a second on amending those rules.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. City Attorney, would you want to give us a summary on what we're doing here? I believe we're adding the ability for commission, committee, and board members to participate virtually, as I recall.
Yes, with your agenda, there was an attachment that showed a red line and bolded version of what was changed from the original. And my system's just a little bit slow here.
That's okay.
Hang on a second.
I know we removed the in-person statements, and then we added some language that meeting rooms will comply with then current social distancing requirements and recommendations. Persons are encouraged to submit written comments as an alternative to in-person statements in relation to agenda items. But actually, I think that was already in the first version for the council meetings. I'm not at the
Correct.
point with the commission and committee members.
We made things match up with the commission, or boards and commissions, to allow them to participate even if there was already a quorum. Just they're basically being treated the same as council, that if they need to participate remotely because of the emergency situation, they're allowed to do that. If a meeting is conducted solely by appearance through telephone, video, or other means, and there's no physical meeting location, then the meeting will have to be done with a live broadcast or streaming, similar to what we're doing tonight. Otherwise, when practicable, the meetings will be done, so depending on staffing and room availability and all of that kind of thing.
And the ability to social distance in that space.
Correct. And then the other change was, we had a provision in that they must be audible, and if the connection was causing difficulty or disruption to the meeting, it could be terminated. We just added at the discretion of the mayor or the presiding member, so it was clear who would take responsibility for making that decision. So.
Okay.
I think those are all the changes.
So does council have any further discussion on allowing that to happen? I know we've had a couple of committees that needed to meet, and this would enable them to be able to get that scheduled this month. All right, please take the vote.
Mugrower,
Aye.
Erickson. Aye. Peschel,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Allison Osby.
Aye.
Krause,
Aye.
Palmieri,
Aye.
carried 7.
All right, next we have new resolution 20-186, approve memorandum of understanding with Greater Oshkosh Healthy Neighborhoods. Did we have anyone registered, or not registered, but submit comments on this item?
No, we did not.
Okay, back to council for motion and a second.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Councilmember Ford.
Just a question for Mr. Davis. This program is not means tested, is that is correct?
That is correct.
Can you explain why?
Healthy Neighborhoods funding is part of the TIF funds that the city's created. 80% of that needs to be means tested according to state law. This would be coming out of the 20% that doesn't need to be means tested.
Okay. And second question, will you be keeping track of the individuals who take advantage of this program and reporting back?
Absolutely. Both the GoHNI will maintain all the records as a task force, and they are prepared to provide everything we need for an audit to be done.
Awesome, thank you.
Mhm.
Other council members, questions for Mr. Davis? Mr. Davis, I just wanted to ask you if you'd just briefly talk about some of the language in our resolution and the memorandum itself. It was a little confusing to me, and I appreciate the clarification about whether the 20,000 was spread across 3 years, or if it was 20,000 a year, because in the memorandum it talks about the 60, and if you could just talk about that matching piece.
Yes, the city's contribution is $20,000, and that's spread over 3 years. So it's a 3-year program, 20,000 from the city, 25 from the community foundation, and 15 would be coming from the property owner. So it's a total of 60,000, and that's probably where the 20,000 versus for 3 years does come up to 60,000, but only 20 of that is city funds. The rest of it's private funds or foundation money. So we leverage $1 for leverage $2 for every dollar the city would be contributing, and that's always been our target when it comes to leveraging funds.
Yeah, those are some great projects. So then just one more question, follow up, in that 20,000 does not come off of their 100,000 per year that we give them already, correct?
No, it does not
It's
come
in
off.
addition.
It's in addition to that,
Okay.
yes. This is as a housing program. What we contract with them is for administration, but community building and engagement, neighborhood revitalization, and their housing program, or the real estate program that they're doing.
Okay, all right. All right. No further discussion, please take the roll.
Mugrower,
Aye.
Erickson.
Aye.
Peschel,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Allison Osby.
Aye.
Krause,
Aye.
Palmieri,
Aye.
carried 7.
Next is 20-187, approve amendment number 2 to tax increment district number 14, Mercy Medical Center redevelopment, to donate positive tax increments to TID number 16 for the 100 block redevelopment. Did we receive any comments on this item?
No, we did not.
All right, back to council for motion and a second.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Mr. Davis, again, would you want to summarize what this is for?
Yes, the city has worked with Greater Oshkosh EDC and our other taxing jurisdictions to create a COVID-19 emergency loan program. One way we were able to achieve that is we converted TIF 16, which is the 100 block in downtown on Main Street, 100 block of Main Street, into a program where we can loan funds to businesses within a half mile of that location. TIF 16 had about $250,000 available for that cash balance available for that loan program. We didn't think that would be enough, so we looked at the other TIF districts that we have that potentially could donate from that district to TIF 16 to grow that fund downtown, and TID 14, which is Mercy Medical, and TID 19, which is the Northwest Industrial Park, had available cash balance to not only make the donation, but cover all the debt service and other pay-go requirements that are still needed for that TIF district. So 14 is Mercy Medical. We've been making pay-go payments. There's other developments that are taking place in that neighborhood, but we still think we can donate $250,000 from TID 14 to TID 16, and that would go into the emergency loan program that GoEDC is administering on the city's behalf.
All right. Thank you very much.
Madam Mayor.
Councilmember Mugrauer.
Mr. Davis, just one quick question. So if we approve this one and the next one, and we've got the budget transfer as well, in addition to the funds we previously allocated in the county chipping in as well, what's the total potential pot up to for people to, for businesses to potentially take advantage of and try to use?
In the city of Oshkosh, it would be $1 million from our TIF and our RLF, and another $300,000 from the county, so it's about $1.3 million, assuming the Joint Review Board approves this tomorrow.
Sounds good. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Councilmember Ford.
Yes, so for this specific loan program, would you have to be within a half mile of the actual TID?
Yes, that's one of the TIF laws that we have to comply with.
Yeah, is there any plans to make more businesses eligible elsewhere?
There's several overlaps, so I think Alan.
Yes, the RLF portion of the fund can be spent anywhere inside the city. So we'd want to spend that outside TIF 16 first, and then the county funds can be spent all throughout the city, so we'd spend that outside the TID 16 circle as well.
Okay.
So there's a $550,000 available throughout the entire city. And just to jump forward a little bit, TID 19, we're also carving out that half mile because there's a few businesses up there that might be able to take advantage of that TID 19 half mile circle.
Okay, good. So we're working to make sure businesses have equitable access regardless
Yes,
of
and
where
it's the
they're
same
located.
application for all the city funds, and GoEDC is working with their partners on the county funding, so they'll be able to mix and match whichever funding source works best for that business based on the limits that we've had to set on the funds based on state law.
Excellent, thank you.
And then if I could just follow up then too, so part of this is typically we see blight elimination and things like that discussed with TID. This is almost more like blight prevention as well as a response to local business need to keep their employees paid, to keep their rent paid and their expenses going during this period. Is that
Yes.
the why part of it? I
that's
mean, not
the-
everybody is getting that piece.
That's the intent behind the program, is that we know there's a lot of distress or stressed businesses right now that don't have income but still have fixed costs and other costs that they're incurring, and we want to keep those businesses, give them some kind of lifeline to keep them going until they can reopen their business and start generating the revenue that they experienced in the past. So this is a temporary measure, and this is what our first step is. We don't know how long this is going to last, so I can't say if I'm going to be back and make other recommendations about replenishing different funds. I was asked before, there's still about over $1 million in the RLF that can still be used on expansions and attractions throughout the city, as well as we might be able to expend a little more out of those TID 14 and 19, but we'd want to talk to the Joint Review Board about that before we exceed the $250,000.
And I guess there was another question that came up about this, and that was, and this might be a little more specific, would landlords, for example, that maybe own several rental properties in that area be eligible to apply for this or eligible to be approved?
Landlords specifically, no. If it's passive income, they'd have to be, say, a property management company that has a management company with employees that's not a passive income type of situation, then they would be eligible, but that's for the property management side, not for the landlord side.
So the property management company would have to be in that area, not the properties. Is that what I hear you saying?
Not the owner.
I think I'm going to have to ask for time to consider that one, because different property management companies have different properties around the city, and I'd probably want to take a look at the rules before I give you an answer off the top of my head.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Sorry, that one just came to me. It wasn't planned.
Understand.
Any further questions or discussion? All right, well, please take the roll.
Mugrower,
Aye.
Erickson,
Aye.
Peschel,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Allison Osby,
Aye.
Krause,
Aye.
Palmieri,
Aye.
carried 7.
All right, next is 20-188, approve amendment number 1 to tax increment district number 19, Northwest Industrial Park, to donate positive tax increments to TID number 16 for the 100 block redevelopment. Anyone registered comments with this?
No one is registered.
Back to council for motion and a second.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. I think we kind of covered most of it in the former, and this one is separate and distinct because it's a different tax increment district, correct?
Correct.
All right, any discussion? All right, please take the roll.
Mugrower,
Aye.
Erickson,
Aye.
Peschel,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Allison Osby,
Aye.
Krause,
Aye.
Palmieri,
Aye.
carried 7.
And now we come to the budget piece of this, 20-189, approve budget amendments to 2020 operating budget for a TID 14 Mercy Medical Center redevelopment, $250,000. B, TID 19 Northwest Industrial Park, $250,000. And C, TID 16 100 block redevelopment, $500,000. Did we receive any comments on this item?
No, we did not.
All right, back to council for motion and second.
So moved.
Second. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. Discussion.
Sorry.
Councilmember McGrower.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Apologies for the pause there. Mr. Davis, actually, the one thing I don't know that I've asked, and let me take a step back. Appreciate all the hard work. I know I mentioned this last meeting, yourself, and the economic development team, as well as finance. Just you guys all come together and figured out a way to get creative to try to help businesses in the community. In terms of organization and oversight and things like that, I know GoEDC is well equipped. We've talked about that before, but we haven't talked about any sort of reporting back to council. Obviously, we're dealing with city funds here, and just making sure that we're getting access to information in reasonable timeframes. What's the anticipation of how are you going to report back to council in terms of, not to say maybe what's been loaned out on a case-by-case basis, but, at what type of intervals can we expect some reporting back in terms of loans out, status, things like that? Or can we build in some expectations that you're going to report back to us at certain intervals?
I'd be happy to do a report at your suggestion. Right now, I think it's a quarterly report we get from GoEDC. I could see this needing to be a little more frequently than that, because the quarter would take us through the end of June, and we might need to know more about it before the end of June regarding what the status of the funds are. So I'm thinking monthly off the top of my head.
Okay. I'm not throwing out any specific ones. Just I think it would be appropriate that we get some sort of just reporting in terms of here's what's happening, here's where we're at, and then obviously once we're through this and once we get into that repayment portion, just how things are progressing in that in terms of repayment as well. So. I'm fine with whatever, and I'll leave it up to your expertise and Mr. Roloff in terms of what you guys want to do, but I think that's reasonable, and if we need more, we know how to get a hold of you, but I think it'd be prudent just to make sure there's something flowing to us on a routine.
Yeah.
Yep.
It'll probably be based on the flow and the demand, but, certainly we want to make people aware that the program's available, so a little reporting back sometimes helps that along.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for bringing that up, Councilmember Mugrower. All right, please take the roll.
Mugrower,
Aye.
Erickson,
Aye.
Peschel,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Allison Osby,
Aye.
Krause,
Aye.
Palmieri,
Aye.
carried 7.
All right, next we have Resolution 20-190, Approve general development plan amendment and specific implementation plan for mixed-use development at the southwest corner of Jackson Street and Pearl Avenue. Plan Commission recommends approval. Did we receive any comments on this, Pam?
No, we did not.
Okay, back to council for a motion and a second.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. All right, Councilmember Mugrower.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Davis, actually, since you're there and you're in the firing squad, it appears tonight. A big change. I didn't get a chance to ask you this question ahead of time, so I apologize. You're not going to maybe be prepared, but you should be in terms of answering this one. It's a big change, going from a 2-story to a 5-story square foot, a big footprint now. Considering the development plan that we had saw before, 3 parcels, 3 buildings, significant mixed use. Can you report to us on maybe what the impetus is behind this big change on that one site? I know this is only that one site, so we don't need to talk about the other 2, but just, in terms of concerns in regards to the other parts of this development that they had proposed.
Let's see, I think the impetus behind this project being the first project, because originally it was not going to be the first project, so I think part of that is the Oshkosh Food Co-op wanting to locate there, so I think Merge is working as quickly as possible to make that become a reality as part of the project. And when they started doing the analysis of what it's going to take to build the 2-story, which was originally proposed with the construction conditions that they have right now, they thought the 5-story would pencil out better for them. It actually adds more value than we were expecting, so there's no downside for that from the city's perspective. We did want to make sure that the other parcels still finished out the rest of the whole development with the 240 plus units and the commercial space and the total value. So they're probably mixing and matching some of those pieces on the 3 different locations, but we'll still get the same product. And I think this one rose to the top because this was the high priority project based on their expectations for leases.
Sounds good. Appreciate it.
Councilmember Erickson.
Thank you, Mayor. So just a question about the rental units themselves. So how many of the units will be wheelchair accessible for tenants?
Let's see, I believe the number was 2 of those units are wheelchair accessible for the tenants, and another are for visitors is what I remember.
Okay. And do we know what the proposed rents are for each of the units?
Yes, and I did not bring that up with me at this time. It's probably back at my desk. They're going to be somewhere in the, depends on the studio and how many bedrooms, but they're going to be somewhere around $900 up to $1,000, $1,100 for those units.
Okay.
I think I have the,
I believe there were some
that's
that
good.
were like efficiencies, were they in the 700 and something dollar range? This has been a while back since that was discussed.
yes, you guys copied me on an
Yes.
email, so thank you. The rents are going to range from $950 for the furnished studio to $1,650 for the 2-bedroom plus. Average rent is $1,194 a month.
And I appreciate, I think, we need rental units at every range. And I think, obviously, there's a need for this level, but I hope to also see some more affordable units and just being able to better understand what our needs are in Oshkosh, too, so that we can make sure we're accommodating all of those needs, whether it's accessibility, affordability, that's needed.
Okay, please take the roll.
Mugrower,
Aye.
Erickson,
Aye.
Paschal,
Aye.
Ford,
Present.
Allison Osby,
Aye.
Krause,
Aye.
Palmieri,
Aye.
carried 6, 1 present.
All right, next we have Resolution 20-191, request Winnebago County take action to waive interest and penalty fees for late property tax installments. Did we receive any registered comments on this?
No, we did not.
All right, back to council for motion and a second.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. Mr. Van Gompel. Councilmember McGrower, did you have a question for him specifically, or?
Actually, just more of a, if you wouldn't mind, want to explain to the people at home, but I'm thankful that we're going to ask for some assistance from the county, and hopefully they'll be willing to help, and I guess give us a little guidance on what your thoughts are here.
Sure. So for those watching at home and for the city council members, the state recently enacted legislation that allows for waiving of penalty and interest for installments on taxes that are due and payable after April 1st. With us being on a 4-payment plan, only the payments in May and July would be eligible for that waiver. But in order to have that waiver approved by the city council, it first has to be approved by the county board. So the resolution before you this evening is to ask the county board to consider that resolution that would give us the ability to make another resolution that would allow us to grant the waiver for penalties and interest on late payment of taxes. So at this point, we're really waiting for Winnebago County to come forward and adopt, and what you're doing by this resolution is asking for their consideration on that resolution. We've had some initial consultations with staff, and it's possible that could happen in May. And again, our next installment is at the end of May.
Perfect. That's all I have.
Any other discussion? All right, please take the roll.
Mugrower,
Aye.
Erickson,
Aye.
Peschel,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Allison Osby,
Aye.
Krause,
Aye.
Palmieri,
Aye.
carried 7.
Okay, next we move on to council discussion and direction of city manager and future agenda items. At our last meeting, we had some discussion on council rules, and so this has come back to us for us to have further discussion on adapting those council rules. I think that probably for efficiency, it may make sense for us to just break this out in the sections that are amended and potentially take a vote on those. Unless council has a preference for doing this in a different way, I would also want to move section 5 before section 4C, as it would make more sense depending upon the outcome of the decision on that. Does anybody have other thoughts on that?
Sounds good.
All right.
Run it like
So
that.
the first item is 1A, and that's just simply the addition of the text from the civility pledge. Previously, we just kind of referred that out, and because it's kind of a graphic poster, I had just asked that we put that in the text so that new council members or anybody wanting to refer to it doesn't have to dig around in other files to come up with that. Should we just take a roll call on each item, I think?
Pam, procedurally, how do you want us to do these? Since these are council rules, I don't know that it,
If there's going to be changes, yes, then I would prefer it individually. If overall there's going to be a huge discussion and debate, then I
think they're asking if you want a motion for
yes,
each one.
Yes, please.
just procedurally, just so we get
Yep.
it.
Mhm. All right. So,
I move
section
that,
1A.
I move we accept 1A as written.
Second.
Any discussion on that item? All right. Please take the roll.
Mugrower,
Aye.
Erickson,
Aye.
Peschel,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Allison Osby,
Aye.
Krause,
Aye.
Palmieri,
Aye.
carried 7.
All right, the next section that was amended was section 3, and that was divided out into an A and a B. So 3A was in reference to agenda items. We had added the language, items for action by council being requested by a minimum of 2 council members. And then the specific time was 4 p.m., no later than 4 p.m. on the Tuesday 1 week prior to the council meeting. And additional strikeout language in there let's see here. Items submitted after the deadline may not be included. Doesn't say it won't, it just says it may not be included on the agenda published on the Friday prior to the council meeting. So we have a motion and a second to get that on the floor.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. Councilmember Ford.
Yeah, the moving of the deadline, that makes sense from a logistics standpoint. I guess I'm still struggling to understand the logic behind needing a minimum of 2 council members. If you could explain the rationale behind that change, or that proposal.
Yeah, I think this was in reference to something that would be more substantive on an action item, and that's also kind of the reason for the reformatting there. Something that could potentially be more substantive, either a resolution or an ordinance change or something that would require additional staff research, and not specifically it doesn't prevent that from being a future agenda item. It was just a thought that we could do that if we chose.
Okay.
Yes,
I guess,
please.
could I ask the city attorney, I know it came up at the reorganization meeting, that this could create potential problems relating to us communicating outside of these chambers?
Correct. I mentioned at the organizational meeting that I was concerned that it may encourage communication outside of the meeting.
Okay. Do you still have those concerns?
I still have those concerns.
Thank you.
Beyond what's already allowable, I think is what was referenced, right? It's fine for one-on-one, it's just for
But if the
people looking.
first person says no.
No, and you go on, that was,
Yes,
so.
You now
Would you
create
like
a
to?
walking quorum, correct, basically?
you potentially are creating walking quorums, yes.
If you went beyond the single person. Okay, so would you like to separate these out further?
I would like to separate these into 2 items. Do I need a
Okay.
motion for that?
Yeah.
Yeah, motion to separate the deadline from the minimum of 2 council members
Second.
item.
Okay, so then we'll be voting on the request for 2 council members submitting action items separately. Please take the roll.
Mugrower,
Can you confirm, we're voting right now on just the minimum of 2 persons, correct? Not the-
Yes.
Not the timeline?
No,
Just the
it's-
separation.
No, the
Oh, just the
separation.
separation. This is the
separation.
amendment. This is to amend it.
Separation,
Okay.
yeah.
Appreciate it, sorry. Aye.
Erickson,
Aye.
Peschel,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Allison Osby,
Aye.
Krause,
Aye.
Palmieri,
Aye.
carried 7.
Now we vote on just the verbiage. I'm sorry. Did you
Correct.
want to have any further
Yep.
discussion?
Yeah.
All right. Motion to adapt the language or, oh boy,
Well,
I've lost.
it's already before you. What you have before you right now is item A, related to whether it's a minimum of 2 council members are going to be required.
Right. Okay. Now, any discussion? All right, sounds like we had it. Please take the roll.
Aye. May I?
Councilmember Peschel.
Sure. I've had some time to think about this language a little bit since our reorganization meeting. I think my initial concern was that it kind of prohibits individuality between council persons to be able to bring up things. But over time, I kind of thought about that as an opportunity for council members to work together to bring forward resolutions or action items. And so in that light today, I'm going to be in support of maintaining the language as it is in here today.
All right. Any further discussion on that piece? Councilmember Erickson.
Thank you. So if we choose not to have this minimum of 2, it doesn't mean, it wouldn't prevent us from having 2 if we wanted it. We would just
Correct.
need a minimum of 1. Okay. So we could still have that collaboration piece, but it wouldn't be a
Yes.
requirement.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah.
All right, please take the roll.
Mugrower,
No.
Erickson,
No.
Peschel,
Aye.
Ford,
No.
Allison Osby,
No?
Krause,
No.
Palmieri,
Aye.
lost 2-5.
All right, now we'll move on to the second piece of this, and that is leaving the language in about the time frame. So we need a motion and a second to adopt the language regarding the time frame.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. All right, please. Bob, before I move too quickly, did you
I
have a
have no-
comment on that?
I
Okay.
have no comments.
All right, please take the roll.
Mugrower,
Aye.
Erickson,
Aye.
Peschel,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Allison Osby,
Aye.
Krause,
Aye.
Palmieri,
Aye.
carried 7.
All right. Next, we're moving on to section 4. No, we're going to skip over 4C and come back to that. We're going to go to section 5, rules pertaining to conduct and options regarding council liaisons, so that depending upon the outcome of our decision on this, that applies to that prior section. So I need a motion and a second on this. Options regarding council liaisons.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion.
Sure.
Councilmember Mugrower.
As I hit the microphone over here and wake everybody up. I think we had a decent discussion last week at our reorganizational meeting in regards to this a bit. I like leaving it as is, maintaining voting rights and their presence, our presence on those boards and commissions. I think it's important. I do wish there was, one more of us to go around, or, just less demands that allowed us to interact with more or all of the boards and commissions. I do wish that was a possibility. It's not, unfortunately. But I think it's important we're there, or at least that we're having some sort of interactions, that we're accessible to those boards and commissions, and that we count towards the quorum, and that we do have a voting presence there, as long as it's within reason. Not too many council members, pushing one board one way or the other with too many presences on there. And I think there's only maybe, correct me if I'm wrong, I think only Long Range Finance is the only one that has 2 council by.
No,
by
actually, landmarks.
resolution?
No, I take that back. Landmarks, we added 1 citizen because of the merger. Never mind.
It was for a very short
Yep.
time.
Right.
Just for a little bit.
Your memory served you
And I know
well.
we do have
Okay.
several, and we have for many years had, myself included, council member acting as a citizen on a board because of their appointment and how it fell. But I think it's important, and I don't know that at this time, with the amount of vacancies we've had, or that we, not had, but that we have right now, or the amount of openings we have, as well as just, it seems like the history of, it is a little challenging to get new people to sign up and to volunteer to spend some time on behalf of their city, that this might not be the right time to create more vacancies. If we had a backlog of people looking to get on, I might have a different mindset maybe, but at this moment, I think status quo is okay.
Well, and surprisingly, since last week, there have been a number of applications coming in. Things change, obviously. But I just want to bring up then the reason why I had suggested that we address this is because we do have 24 plus boards and commissions that we're staffing with 7 council members, and 10 of those are the statutorily required ones. The others are our local options. We may be adding a new board and commission this year yet, and that many of the boards and commissions would like to have council representatives, and they don't necessarily. So I think that, this gives us some flexibility to have that discussion, these were some placeholders for discussion points, and that's why it's on here, and I appreciate comments and feedback or other options. So right now, we have 4 different things to discuss. We can add something else if somebody prefers. The one is status quo, leaving it as is, maintaining the voting rights. The second discussion point, liaisons shall be ex officio members of the assigned board or commission with no voting rights and not count towards the quorum. And then a third item, if a council member misses, too many assigned meetings as liaison, there could be a nomination for a replacement. And then a final one would be, we could eliminate the council member appointments as liaisons to boards and commissions. And as I understood it, maybe city attorney, you can reference this, we are not required to have council representatives on those boards and commissions by the state.
Correct. I don't recall any of the boards or commissions that require them.
The only one I can think of is maybe Housing Authority because of the agency piece in the language
That
on
might be
that.
the
I
one.
think maybe Housing Authority does actually require it. But I could be wrong.
Yeah, I'd have to look, but if we go down that route, we can check each one.
Sure. I think also you received a copy of the matrix. It may actually be, let's see, included here at the end of that document in your packets. I believe Diane provided that for us to show which of the city boards and commissions had like the statutory reference, the ordinance reference, the number of council reps. But ultimately, it's up to us to decide whether or not we want to adopt any of these or keep as is. So I entertain a motion and a second to put one of those options forward.
To make a motion to maintain voting rights.
Second.
Discussion? All right, please take the roll.
Mugrower,
Aye.
Erickson,
Aye.
Peschel,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Allison Osby,
Aye.
Krause,
Aye.
Palmieri,
Aye.
carried 7.
All right, now that allows us to go back to 4C. And this is also 2 items, one being 4B and 4C. So 4B is kind of making up for adding time for reporting activities by reducing time to balance that out. So if we want to take up 4B first, and that's, again, we had language in there that said 5 minutes. This would reduce it to 3 if we were to need that additional time. It didn't sound like in our last discussion this was highly favored, so we'll just vote on it separate now, vote it up or down. Okay, motion and a second on 4B.
So moved.
Second.
All right, any discussion on 4B?
Actually, if you don't mind.
Councilmember Mugrower.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Actually, I appreciate you and I had a good conversation last week regarding, this was one of the main topics, I think, helped clarify some thoughts on this one. And I know I expressed it last week, I have concerns with, reducing our ability to speak. I think just point blank, just reducing our ability and the length of time that we have the ability to interact and speak on any issue, especially making it less than, any of the citizens that come up here and want to talk to us. They have the ability to speak for 5 minutes. I think we should as well on any topic. But I think it sounded like, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't want to put words in your mouth, was to, I think you kind of alluded to it, was to potentially maybe make up for some additional minutes, maybe at the end if people wanted to report back on boards and commissions. Our meeting's getting a little longer, yes. If we clocked them out, they probably are a little longer. And that's okay. We're doing the people's work, and if it takes a few extra minutes, and that's fine. But I don't think reducing our ability to speak or our time allotment is the way to achieve that. I think it just has to be okay that the meeting length then just gets a few minutes longer to allow for others to speak on behalf of those boards and commissions. So I won't be supporting the change, but I definitely support people on the next one, voicing whatever updates they want to bring to us. So.
All right. Anybody else? All right, please take the roll on 4B.
Mugrower,
Nope.
Erickson,
No.
Peschel,
No.
Ford,
No.
Allison Osby,
No.
Rousey,
No.
Palmieri,
Aye.
lost 1-6.
All right, next is 4C. So this would just add language that says council members would be given the opportunity to report on activities of their assigned boards and commissions to which they are liaison. The mayor will ask each council member to provide a report if applicable. Such report should be limited to 1 minute per assigned board or commission. If greater discussion is required, the item may be scheduled for a future agenda. And the intent here is to just kind of give a placeholder for that, much like we do some of the outstanding issues for city manager. That opportunity obviously has been discussed that you could take that under council member statements, and this would probably be the placeholder is under council member statements, and certainly council members could decline or pass. Can I have a motion and a second for discussion on 4C?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. Councilmember Ford.
Yeah, I'm good with this change. I think those boards and commissions are a bridge between us and citizens, and it doesn't really do much good if we're not coming back and reporting what we're hearing. So to give us the opportunity to do so makes a heck of a lot of sense. And now I know that we have the opportunity to do so regardless, but putting it on the agenda might jog our memory. I don't think there's any harm to it, and only positives. So I'll be in support.
Bob want to speak? It was his.
Yep. Bob?
I have no comments.
Okay, please take the roll.
Mugrower,
Aye.
Erickson,
Aye.
Peschel,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Allison Osby,
Aye.
Rousey,
Aye.
Palmieri,
Aye.
carried 7.
All right, next we have direction on proposed liquor license renewal fees for 2020. City manager, are you going to pass this to our city clerk, or are you going to start this off?
We'll probably do it in a team approach, but I think City Clerk Ubrig provided you with a summary of where we are currently. The idea was to discuss whether or not we wanted to provide some relief to these license holders for a primary reason. Many of them are currently not able to use their license. And so what the summary here shows is what the state minimum is allowed. We cannot go below that number. State maximum, we can't go above that number. And then we showed you what we currently have as our fee. In most cases, we're currently at the state maximum. So the proposal is to go to the state minimum temporarily during the emergency for this renewal period. There's a couple asterisks, different places, but there's a publication cost of $20. That's a hard cost that we incur, so that we would continue to do that because that's a hard cost for the city. But other than that, we would waive all the other fees. This would still result in inspections because we have a lot of different health and safety issues that we want to check out during the course of that inspection. So City Clerk Ubrig is the one who administers this program, and she may want to add some additional comments because she put a lot of information into this sheet for council to review.
I honestly don't have anything to add because you did a great job.
Well, thank you.
So I guess my question would be, though, if a council member wanted to separate these out, should we also take these line by line, or how does council feel about, or?
Fortunately, whatever direction you give us tonight, we have to come back with an ordinance for a temporary change in this, and that's why we're bringing it to you now, because Pam needs to get out with the notices and, start arranging things, and so we want to be able to tell the people in one notice. the amount will be X amount of dollars, so that, before they start writing checks and things get confusing. So, if you have any concerns or questions, I would suggest make a motion so that we amend it, but we'll come back at a subsequent meeting to approve the whole ordinance package.
Okay.
And my hope is that it would come to the council on May 12th and that we would waive the rules and adopt it that evening, please.
She said that very well, so.
Can I ask,
Councilmember McGrath.
can I ask what your thoughts, before I give any comments on it, but you obviously have a thought in terms of splitting them up for a reason, or splitting them up in
Well, I
in
guess
some
I'm-
sort of fashion, so I'm just wondering
Right,
what
I
and why.
think this was meant to be some relief for, some of the businesses that have not been able to operate. But as I understand it, those Class A, the ability to sell off-premise, maybe like your larger grocers or things like that have not necessarily had that same hardship. So I guess that was really the question, is whether or not we wanted to discuss just making it clean and offering it all as a forgivable amount for 2020, or if we wanted to separate that out with the Class A, B, C, or A retailer. I'm sorry, I may have mixed that up. I meant the Class A retailer. Maybe city clerk could help me out here on the Class A liquor and the Class A retailer. Which ones have been the most impacted that have not been able to operate? Because we've closed down the taverns at
The
that.
Class A are for the consumption off premises, so you would go to that business purchase and then consume it off-site.
Okay.
Class B is where you consume it on-site.
Yep. And then Class A retailer is where you're purchasing the entire package and taking it off-site, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so I don't know if you guys want to have that conversation separately on each item.
No, I think we can have it as one big discussion. I don't think it adds too much to,
All right,
personally.
discussion then.
I'll start it off, I don't mind. No, I appreciate City Manager Roloff and City Clerk bringing this to us. I know we talked about it previously. I think anything we can do to try to help, the entire business community. I know there are some businesses that are doing very well right now. It is what it is. There are some that are struggling, and there are some that are very, very much struggling. I don't think myself, I won't speak for anyone else, I don't think I'm in a position up here to say that right now you're struggling less. So we're going to if we're going to help them, let's try to help you. That we shouldn't help you, I think, is what my thoughts are on that. For on the individual basis, what is a small amount of money to some of these entities, it is a large amount of money to others. And I get the reasoning behind potentially, our grocery stores right now are going to hurt over $350. No, they're not. But I think that's not the point. I think the point is just to try to help as much as possible, by and large, and just to show that, we're willing to help. We're trying to figure out ways to just help everyone in the community equally. So I'm fully supportive of this. I think it goes a long way to help. Yes, for clarity's sake or for accountability's sake, that means the city of Oshkosh is going to take, in this case, $77,500 hit in terms of revenue. That's a budget adjustment that you're also going to bring back to us on a way to fund that, or that, we're going to see that in November, that revenue is going to be $77,000 lower, and we've got to somehow make up for that. But I think this is, at this time, it's a unique thing, it's the right thing. I hope other communities follow us, and I like it, so.
Councilmember Allison Osby.
Thanks. So I guess my question is, obviously there's 5 different categories. 3 of them have 0 amounts. 2 of them, do have a proposed fee. How was that decided?
We took it down to the state minimum in every case. So the $50 was because that's the state minimum. That's, yeah, if you just take a look at we're currently at the maximum, we're proposing to go to the minimum, so.
Yep. Yes,
Yeah,
you're correct.
that's why we couldn't go lower than 50 on the first two.
Yep. Yes. Okay, thank you.
And I guess I'm a little confused. So the proposal is for $0 for 3 of the classes, but $50 each on Class A and Class B. So it's not exactly equal for everybody, right?
That's
Liquor.
correct.
That's,
Minimum.
it's how, we can go as low as we can with the first two there. That we're going to the state minimum. State does have
Oh,
a
okay.
minimum as well as
Yeah,
a maximum.
I see that.
I
see
forgot that the state.
No, this is
Yes.
all new,
Yeah.
so we
I
try
see
to make it as simple
We
as
can't go
possible.
lower than that, I see.
Yep.
Yeah.
Councilmember Ford.
Yeah, State has some fun liquor laws, education. No, I'm in favor of this as well. I was thinking of, Class A retailer. I was talking to a gentleman in my neighborhood who runs the gas station. They're just getting crushed, and that'd be in the same category there as a big grocery store, but people aren't stopping in. Talked to a bar owner on Main Street today. Same deal, they're getting crushed. I don't think we can in good conscience be charging them for something they're not using when they're
It sounds
hurting.
like a goodwill gesture.
Yeah.
It is.
It's very small, but,
It will
all
help.
right. Okay, so do you need any further direction?
I think this will be a nice attachment to the ordinance that we'll have at the next meeting.
Okay. And then our 2021 budget calendar.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In your agenda, Mr. Van Gompel has prepared a budget calendar. The primary reason we're giving this to you at this time is really to draw your attention to those that are highlighted in gray. What we're looking at is trying to schedule council workshops. And we're proposing a slightly different chronology of workshops. We're trying to get the capital improvement plan approved on an earlier basis, and this is something that both Mr. Van Gompel and I have experience in. Getting this to the Plan Commission, I think you may recall it, you got it in like September. Other Plan Commissions haven't gotten it until November or December. We're trying to get that back even more to get you to approve it around late July, early August. What that does then is when we get into the budget preparation mode, then we already have the plan in play, and then it's fitting the numbers into the budget system to tie the plan and make the plan more of a planning document than a financial document. It's got to balance out still, but we still want to make sure with that. Russ, did I cover everything, or you got anything else that you want to add to that? Because we're asking July 7th or 8th. Now, I know everybody's vacations are totally screwed up with everything going on, and that's probably asking a lot because I can't guarantee you what July is going to look like right now, but the idea was to try to do that early. Typically, these workshops are about 2 hours long, maybe 5 to 7, 5:30 to 7:30-ish, something like that. So that's kind of what we were looking for, right, Russ?
Yep.
And then similarly, August 19th would be another council workshop.
Madam Mayor.
Councilmember Bookerauer.
Thank you. No, I appreciate you guys trying to get, especially that one, to us and to the Plan Commission a little bit earlier. I don't wonder if the early projections and direction on priorities from council might be needed a little bit earlier than that. I mean, generally, you're going to base your, I know you guys are going to do your CIP stuff off of scoring. You've got a rough idea. You're trying to whittle it down, but you've also got to get direction from us in terms of how much debt we're willing to take on, and that's going to have that has a big impact, whether it's, a couple $100,000 into the 7 figures. That's going to have an impact on equipment and projects. You all right with working on the CIP and then telling, us telling you to chop some, quickly after that, that's fine, but you may want some direction from us a little bit earlier in that process, maybe. I don't know, what's your thoughts?
Well, again, this timing and schedule kind of works out. What I've been accustomed to in working with other communities is having a dialogue and discussion on what capital projects you're willing to take on and doing that up front, and then taking the first year and kind of incorporating that into the operating budget process. So that's what we were focused on. The August timeline for getting your input on some of the other things is pretty much on the operational side of things. So we'll have the discussion, I anticipate having the discussion in July about your comfort level with debt, reviewing where we're at in the debt, looking at our capital projects and figuring out what we can finance both in the current year and future years. And I think it's important when you're having that discussion and know all the other capital items that we could be facing. And actually, we might be going out even longer than 5 years. Initially, it'll be just 5 years presented, but we're actually starting to do some of the behind-the-scenes work to go out almost 10 years, so that when we start talking about streets and maybe some of the other things, that we have to take a bit broader, long-range approach to make sure we're fitting in projects and be able to finance them accordingly. So I'm pretty comfortable with the schedule. A lot of the operating discussions, as you know, really depends on what's happening at the state level. And there's going to be a lot of things happening between now and August on that. And we're trying to stay on top of it as we go along. So I'm pretty confident that this would work. And I think it'll help you in your discussion and trying to prioritize not only our capital projects, but our operating priorities.
All right. Councilmember Ellison Osby?
Yeah, I think it's good. I think this year is going to be incredibly interesting. This will probably be similar to some of the things that we've seen back in 2009, 2010, because obviously we had the financial crisis then, which impacted sometimes tax payments that came in, other revenues that we see, and at the end of the day, our payments on our debt come out of operational. Mm-hmm. And so as we look to change things like, something even, with helping business owners, although I'm super glad we're doing it, it is a loss of revenue. We're seeing loss of revenues actually kind of across the board. So that will, I think, certainly come into play as well. Mostly, I think, tax payments, if they're able to come in on time or reasonably on time, because that obviously dictates a lot. Because obviously, there might be some upsides to taking on additional debt depending on interest rates and what company bids come at. But we also have to have the revenue in order to, operational revenue in order to pay that debt.
Yeah, just to follow up on those comments just real quickly. As you know, the cycle in Wisconsin is we're pretty much set with our state aid and our tax values for this year. As your finance director, my concern is, what's going to happen to property values come January 1 of 2021, and that's really going to be the levy that will be going forward. So that and the impact on state revenue. State is very dependent on sales tax revenue, and if that goes down, I'm not sure what's going to happen with the state budget going forward. And we'll probably be getting our numbers later than what we've been accustomed to, even some of the preliminary numbers. So it's going to be an interesting budget cycle.
There's going to be a number of things coming into play that I think will make this budget season very fun and exciting.
I'm glad you're saying it.
Yeah, just trying to put a positive spin on it. Yeah, that was rough for the city.
So I think the hint was earlier about vacations, that if there are vacations allowed at that point, that, we may have this all of a sudden number of folks who may not quite be available. So does everybody have a save the date then for that week of July 7th?
Save the date, I like that term. Yeah.
I can't take credit, that was you. All right,
Thank
then.
you. That was really it, just to give you an idea as we look forward. For our new members, look ahead. The approval is projected for November 10th, which is our first meeting of the month in November. The reason we have it that date is so that Mr. Van Goppel and his staff can get everything into the system so we get the property tax bill mailed out in time so that people can start paying their taxes. So that's the primary reason we get it done as early as we do.
Mr. City Manager, can I do additional comment?
Oh,
To
yeah.
follow up on that. And I'm not sure what has been communicated about the League of Wisconsin Municipalities. They offer a session called Local Government 101 that just gives you a brief background on government finance and the timeline and those type of things. It comes out in your league magazine, and for new council members and existing council members, it's always interesting to follow up on that. So if you can participate in that webinar, that's always very helpful.
Yeah, it's going virtual this year for obvious reasons. Yeah, that would be a good session to attend.
Yeah, and I attended the webinar just as a refresher in my second year and picked up something else on it, so.
Yep.
And it was quite painless, really. It was kind of fun.
Yeah.
All right, anybody else on that one? Yeah.
I think we need to get you out more, Mayor.
You know, probably. Probably. All right, so next we just have the number 31, municipal options pertaining to potential assistance for landlords and tenants during and after COVID-19 emergency. I asked to put this on so that we could have a conversation about what some of the options are. I appreciate the staff putting together some of the background on the orders as it relates to the state and the federal, and city attorney kind of fleshing out, you know, some of the restrictions, if you will. But the reasoning is a couple reasons, and one is, you know, we were able to put together, you know, $1 million, which will probably go quite quickly for our local business community. And you know, I had heard from a number of folks here in town that were either experiencing, you know, threatening evictions as soon as the order is lifted. Received a couple of copies of letters, in addition to, you know, some advocacy working agencies, folks that were concerned that once that order is lifted, you know, our number of folks facing eviction and potential homeless families increasing significantly. So I believe you all got a hard copy and probably received an email yesterday, I believe it was. And so just kind of open that up for some discussion. You can note here that there's the state order that put the 60 days, which will be lifting soon, and then the federal one for, as it relates to more of the subsidized specific housing. So I'll just open that up for discussion for council. Councilmember Erickson.
Thank you. I think this is something that we really need to look at, and you know, I'm concerned that once the moratorium is lifted, because so many renters have had difficulty if they've been laid off paying their rent, and also the number of small landlords that we have in the city who are relying on that rent to be able to pay their own mortgage payments. I think, you know, we need to look at both sides and be able to help support where we can. So I'm supportive.
If I may, Mayor.
Councilmember Ford, oh, sorry. Councilmember Peschel and then Ford.
Sure. Thank you for the time. So I myself have received several calls related to tenant landlord issues, and what I'm finding is that there's a greater deal of information that exists within the executive orders that aren't necessarily understood in regards to what the relationship should be held like. So between landlords and tenants. And I think the biggest challenge here is that there needs to be some level, we want to encourage there to be some level of flexibility during this period, and a level of compassion after the moratorium has been lifted. So I guess I'd really like to see if there's the possibility of creating some type of rent relief fund that is based in the need that was created through the executive order, the multiple executive orders. So, I mean, that's just one level of need there. The other level is a level of advocacy and communication and mediation between, currently, right now, between residents or tenants and their landlords. And I know that there's a lot of that pre-existing mediation going on, but I think the issue comes in those smaller companies or mom and pop landlords that also live kind of month to month when it comes to their properties and being able to sustain off of that, and figuring out ways for them to encourage communication and mediation and compassion through that. So I think it was either Attorney Lawrence and our city manager Roloff had sent over that document, which is pretty exhaustive, and I want to thank both of them for doing that. So, but I think there's stuff that exists within this document that we could take steps towards. So I'd encourage there to be further communication with staff in regards to creating some temporary solutions.
Councilmember Ford.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think the immediate thing to do is to do all we can to educate on the specifics of both the Wisconsin Emergency Order and the Federal CARES Act, so people have an idea of what they're dealing with right now. And then there's a nice list of existing resources that we have in the community that could be useful once these orders run out. But I think the larger question about the rental relief fund, some of the examples that were helpfully provided give a variety of different ways to organize that, including using a nonprofit entity or some type of third party to actually be the implementer. So that may be a place where we want to really engage with the local nonprofit community, so we're not necessarily having to do it all ourselves.
So I guess,
Councilmember Ellison Osby.
sure, so my question would be, for this coming forward, are you looking for, to Mr. Ford's point, having a nonprofit perhaps be the conduit, and then what role are you envisioning the city playing in this?
Well, I think just as we, we're able to find a third party, Go ADC for the businesses to, plug some extra funding in there, perhaps that's one way of doing it. Another way might be to partner with the county or another willing, partner. I guess that would be a public-public partnership, wouldn't it, if it was specifically there. I guess that's, one piece of it. I guess there's also, can we encourage, do we have an interest as a council in encouraging the state legislature to extend that beyond the current order? If we don't do any of these things, I guess the concern is, how will we manage the cost of a significant number of people being without housing? And so that's, why this comes into play, so certainly.
Sure, and I'm glad to see it on here, and I think it's incredibly admirable, and we should be concerned about the impact of what's going to happen with our citizens. I think my only concern is regarding the funds, because obviously through assisting the businesses, that's a loan. So I'm not sure, is this a potential loan of pulling money together for people that would need rental assistance, or is this, something that would be more gifted or granted? Because then I think that sets a whole other line of questions of then who's eligible, how do you prioritize the need, who administers, which, could be a nonprofit. That number seems almost a little bit scary. I don't know that we could even raise enough funds through private or public partnership, especially if you take our size in relation to the others, just watching some of the entities that have tried to help. My concern is, and where maybe we need to look at making sure that we have adequate resources is, we've talked about what are we going to do regarding, the homelessness population. And my understanding is the city has been in communication with the day-by-day warming shelter. It sounds like they're going through some transitional things right now, and I think they're trying to make some decisions of whether or not, are they going to be open longer in order to possibly deal with some needs, and, are our efforts better spent there, and maybe perhaps encouraging or doing what we can as a city to partner along with them, not necessarily from a funding, but if there's anything else we can do regarding extending permits, capacity, things of that nature. But I do think it's really important, and maybe it's something that we could put on the city website, is to have, if there are tenants that are having challenges with their landlords, and they are scared of eviction because, they've been unemployed maybe perhaps since the shutdown, that information is accessible on our city website, maybe on a link on our homepage.
And I think we should certainly we do have some of that already on the website, I believe, buried somewhere deep. It's not necessarily at the forefront, but I think we've already acknowledged that while some of these loans that are going to businesses, they may not be able to pay those back, so they may end up being gifts. And, if we're able to find it there. And I believe that we have an allocation of CDBG, and I can't speak to whether or not we would be allowed to use those extra CDBG dollars that are coming in. I think they're called CDBG 2 or DB, I believe. There's like a new acronym for the add-on half allocation. And from what I understand, you're right. The warming shelter is going to be opening back up. However, they're very restricted as to who can go there. That would not, be anybody under, I think it's 16 or 18 years old. They're quite full and having to turn people away, and limited to even 25. So while that may help with some small end of it, the anticipation of the backlog of the eviction process is expected to be significantly beyond that number. And so that's really concerning. Councilmember McGrawer. Oh, sorry.
Well, you go ahead.
There's, the staff did a great job. I think Deputy City Attorney Amy Vandenhoven was one who put a lot of this stuff together. Some of it was limitations to let you know what, there are certain things we absolutely can't do in terms of, for example, we can't stop evictions, but as the mayor suggested, asking the state to extend that moratorium on that might make sense. And I think as we get closer to that May 26th date, that's going to become a little more urgent with other municipalities, but that's something we could do. The CDBG money, we still don't know what we can do with this money. We've been given great news that we have $500,000, but there are no rules yet on how to use it. We immediately thought, because there were some intents that were listed, that it was intended to help with homelessness. And, I think we could qualify this as perhaps homeless prevention versus dealing with like day by day, which is really chronic homelessness. And Chief Stanley and everybody on staff has been doing a great job working with day by day to get back on their feet. They've been closed since April 15th. Their goal is to get back up and running by next week, but they've got to get going on that.
May 4th, I believe, was the email I saw today.
That looks like we're crossing our fingers with that. We're working towards it, and staff is doing everything that they can to get them back on their feet so they can do that. And our nonprofit partners have been great. The whole issue is, what can we do? The survey showed you a lot of cities that have done things. No Wisconsin cities have done anything at this point. I think part of it is the way we're structured in Wisconsin. A lot of the human services really are at the county level. So I think we need to take a look at what the county's doing, make sure that we're not, somebody said we don't want to be duplicating anybody's efforts. If they're doing A, we want to make sure that we're not duplicating A or in conflict with A. We want to make sure that we're compatible with that. So we're going to need to do some more outreach in that regard.
City Manager, could I just interrupt you for just a moment? Sure. Point of privilege here. Chief Smith, could I ask you, When officers respond to folks who have maybe set up tents or temporary shelter that don't have an address, how do we handle that?
It depends on where the tents are located.
So if it's, I don't know, in a city park, along the Wyowash Trail, or,
Currently, there is no camping permitted within city parks, so we ask them to move on from the city park location.
do we have any referrals for them to seek shelter elsewhere in the city?
No, we do not.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So anyway, we're still looking at those things, and I wish I had a solid answer for you this evening, and I don't. We still need to wait for what's called the Federal Register, which is a list of rules that the Community Development Block Grant, that's where they promulgate their rules. We don't even know all those rules yet. We're still operating under regular CDBG rules, and there are a lot of rules there that are oftentimes frustrating, but we're going to work through those. So we're going to keep looking at this.
And I think you and I had a conversation too about whether or not, if we did put something together in a funding piece, we know that it's not going to fix everything, but whether or not that surplus dollar amount that we talked about previously, we had a blank space for unreimbursed COVID-19 expenses, that there is another option there. Is that your recollection?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly, I mean, that would be a council decision and how they want to use the surplus from 2019. I think the reason the council delayed action on that was we want to see what's going on. They didn't want to commit to something and then say, oh, wish we'd known about this. This is on the horizon. We don't know how bad it's going to be, but there will be inevitably some evictions from someplace. We can't deny that. The level, we just don't know yet, and how other groups may come forward, if some of the CDBG money can be used, and how can that be used. You know, one of the concerns we have is we want to help people, but if we help them and they still get evicted, were we successful? And I think the answer is, well, maybe we weren't. If all we did was spend money but people are still evicted, that would probably be viewed as a failure. So we want to make sure that if we're going to spend money, we spend money that's going to give us a success of avoiding eviction. So those are the things we're still struggling with, and I appreciate all the comments.
Do we have any idea on the timeline of those funds?
The CDBG funds, well, we got the notice that we've got approved for this, but the rules aren't out yet, so.
But any idea when it's actually going to come, because compared to when the
Couple, 3 weeks, I think.
deadlines come? Okay.
I think a couple, 3 weeks
Very
before we're
Wisconsin
gonna
way
get
to
it.
phrase that.
Yeah, it was a weird call with the person from HUD. I'll just leave
Okay.
it at that.
Okay.
But didn't give me any definitive answer.
But hopefully we'll have these funds before the state emergency order
That would make sense.
runs out.
So the March 27th order at the state level with the 60-day ban would expire this week, right?
No, it would expire about the same time that the emergency is lifted.
Oh, right.
Yeah, but still,
Fast
it's
forwarding.
still less than a
Very-
month away. I
right.
mean, so it isn't like we've got all the time in the world, and if it doesn't come out for 3 weeks, we're going to be scrambling to look at the rules and say, can we do this?
But if-
The intent is there, but the rules may not mesh with that.
But would it really be a failure if a landlord ended up getting paid rent that wouldn't necessarily qualify for the earlier economic relief package that we talked about?
Depends on your definition of success.
Councilmember McGuire.
Thank you, Madam. I appreciate it. Just a couple brief thoughts, I guess. I think, I don't know, it may have been you who suggested maybe asking the legislature or the governor to possibly extend that first order, at least in terms of the evictions. I think there, as with many of the orders that have come out of Madison, there is a lot left to be desired in terms of a lot of information that's been left out, or how crystal clear some of those orders have been or have not been. And there's a Pandora's box that's already been created in terms of rent and evictions and that process. I think asking them to extend that individual portion only exacerbates that problem. I think we need to be careful and really really get informed in terms of what kind of impacts that would have, just extending that. But I think it'd be well within our purview, collectively, to suggest that the legislature as well as the governor, get their act together a little bit and figure out a way to help people across the entire state in terms of this issue. It's obviously not a regional one, it's not a local one, it's an entire state issue, it's actually a national issue, but I think they're gonna have a better time figuring out a solution in terms of something that can be widespread helpful. I think the 7 of us trying to cobble together a plan up here with without a lot of information is gonna lead to a plan that isn't as successful as something could be, I think. In comparison to what we've approved previously for the business community. I think succinctly, that was a few individuals that know a lot about putting together a program, instituting a program, and that have the ability and have shown they have the ability to execute something. That's why this council, or previous council, approved it. GoEDC is a great conduit. They have been a fantastic partner for us in terms of interacting with the business community and making sure that our funds are being spent as well as possible. Yes, I admitted it. I said it last meeting or 2 meetings ago. We're not going to get every dollar back that we've approved. But I have a pretty high confidence factor that we're going to get a fair amount of that back. And that it will be a small amount, hopefully, that we invested in the community that allowed most businesses to stay up and running. But I think us 7 trying to cobble together a plan is not the way to go. You've got to find, you have to have invested community partners come together and put together something to bring to us to vet. Rather than the seven individuals up here trying to hash something out. I think whether it's a workshop or some other, I know how that previous plan was put together, and it went together fast, and it was well received early on by a multitude of partners. You've got to have a bunch of partners together that can really pull together, because resources, the educational part, it's a huge part. There's not enough education for the landlord community or the rental community in general, in terms of what's going on or what needs to happen. So I think there's a lot of partners that need to be brought together, not just a dollar figure created and then what?
Well, and I think that staff worked rather hard on that other solution. I think it would not be completely up to the 7 of us. Councilmember Krause, did you have an opinion on this?
Sure. I think it's going to cause hardship after this is all over for landlords and renters. I look at some of the other rental relief fund programs that other cities have passed. It's a pretty substantial amount of money in a lot of them, and it seems like they get exhausted within a week or two, or one city had to go to a lottery because they had such a large demand. I just think it'd be a large task to take on for the city. If we had dedicated dollars set aside for it, it would obviously be something we could look into. I just don't know how much it would really help if you delay it a month of somebody's rent, because where are they going to come up with the other 2 months of rent? It's a hard one, because the money's going to come due, just like the mortgage deferments that have happened. People are still going to have to make their payments. So I just don't know how much money we could set aside, or if we could even have enough to make a meaningful impact for people.
Well, I think that we've seen that, there have been promises that the stimulus payments are coming, that the unemployment payments are coming, but a significant number of people have not yet received those. And, it's kind of like what we've been doing on flattening the curve, right? We're trying to slow things down a little bit to allow for some of these numbers to flesh out. And, I believe that we can do this, and it may be the case that other cities have not done this in Wisconsin. Basically, I think that, we owe it to the citizens of this community to at least try to partner and be part of the solution. Councilor Ford, I'm sorry, Allison Asby.
Madam Mayor, I was just going to say, I do like your idea, and I think Mr. Mugarar expanded on it, that, as far as like us perhaps going to the state, and it'd be interesting to know if other municipalities would be interested in joining us and perhaps trying to solve it at the state level for sure, because they're going to have a greater impact, I think, both for tenants and for landlords. Because at the end of the day, there is somewhat of an economics here for the landlords as well. If you're not collecting rent, unless you own the property outright, they have a mortgage as well. If they don't pay the mortgage to the bank, they're likely to be foreclosed on. So at the end of the day, eviction is a possibility. So I mean, it can be full circle. And I have heard of good stories in Oshkosh in which there have been, I would assume either the property is owned or very little is owned, in which the landlords have offered discounts on the rents. And so I've also heard good stories as well. But I mean, just because I'm bringing up these points doesn't mean that I'm discounting my concern or anybody's concern regarding the population. But again, it is a slippery slope, because how do we define who was not paying rent prior to COVID-19? Are they eligible? Are they not eligible? And again, where is the need? Do seniors come before a young family of 4? I worry about that slippery slope of determining, probably with not enough funds to go around, that this would be something that would literally have no floor on it. And how much of an impact can we make just within our community? Would it be more effective, as you had mentioned, to maybe propose something and ask the state to do something?
Councilmember Ford.
Yeah, I mean, I hear where everybody's coming from, and I think, just to be clear, I wasn't, and I'm not sure if anybody else was suggesting that us 7 should come up with some type of plan and try to implement it. I think for something like this to be successful, we have to decide whether or not it's a priority from us as a city council and concept to get involved in this. And the second step is finding out who can we actually partner with that has relationships within this community, that has experience dealing. I mean, we have organizations in town right now that are already dealing with individuals that are dealing with housing insecurity. I mean, to me, that's the place where you would start, because yes, of course, we should not be the ones implementing it. It should be something like how GoEDC worked with the business community, because they have those relationships. So I just want to make that clear.
Well, it sounds like, City Manager, we do have at least 4 people who are interested in pursuing this. Are you comfortable with having staff work on a couple of different routes here?
Yeah.
You need more specifics?
Yeah, and we still need to learn a little more. So, I think it was a good discussion. We have things to work on. I mean, somebody mentioned, you gave us direction, or, we suggested reaching out with with GoEDC for the business. We have to find a parallel to that. So we'll appreciate all the discussions.
So we could see this back like May 12th?
We're going to probably have it back at every meeting. In fact, probably what I'll do is we have another item on the agenda called outstanding issues. I think I'm just going to put it there so we have
Placeholder.
It's a good placeholder, yeah.
Okay. All right. Anybody else? All right. On to Councilmember Peschel would like to lead a discussion on update on April 7th, 2020 absentee process. Councilmember
Thank you,
Peschel.
Mayor. So, even last week, I was still receiving emails from residents in the community that had not yet received their absentee ballot for the April election. So I thought it would be a good opportunity for Mark and staff, specifically Pam, if they wanted to make a comment as in relation to the issues that were with the absentee process for the April election, and what we know about the outcome of those ballots that never made it to voters.
We will try to do this without steam coming out of our ears, because the residents who complained were absolutely correct in their frustration. And I know you heard it from multiple people. I think even the new council members heard it as they were out on their campaign trail. It was a frustration, and certainly City Clerk Huberg and her staff bore the brunt of it, but Pam, you want to go, or we'll just tag team so we keep each other from expressing our concerns? Yeah, with our steam coming out of our ears.
As of to date, I have heard nothing as to what happened to those ballots. They have not been delivered, as far as I know. I haven't received any calls, nor have they returned back to my office. I've been told there's an investigation, but we haven't heard anything as of today.
I placed a request to Congressman Grothman's office last week requesting that they investigate with the Postal Service. I lent my name so that I'm the complaining party for his constituent relations people. Congressman Grothman's office indicated they would begin the process. That was probably about Thursday by the time I had to fill out a form and everything. So I did all that. But I want to assure the residents who are rightfully concerned, we developed a process because we had people who had a little time on their hands because we shut them down very quickly, that came and helped the clerk's office. In fact, Pam was out of the office for 14 days. You figure out why she was out 14 days. But when she came back, there were 3 city employees who weren't normally working in the city clerk's office in her office, and they had a single job: get those absentee ballots out the day they came into their office. And they achieved that every single day. So we knew something was wrong when we started getting calls from our residents saying, where are our ballots? Because we would look and say, our records show that it was mailed on this date. There was some concern, and I was disappointed in the Elections Commission telling some of our elected officials, well, it must be the clerk's fault because it's impossible for you to get them mailed out the same day you receive them. My response to that is, oh yeah, because our staff worked late if they had to, but the goal every day, which they achieved every single day, they got those ballots out. However, that's little consolation to residents who all they wanted to do was fill out a ballot and mail it back. They have every right, but we haven't even been granted the courtesy of a phone call by the U.S. Postal Service. We started calling them on March 30th because we knew something was wrong, and it was denial, 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 and then we didn't get a call from the Postal Service. The Wisconsin Elections Commission got a call from the Postal Service. We have still not been given the courtesy of a return phone call or a return email. So that's why Ms. Uberg and I are very disappointed and frustrated. We're going to have another topic on the agenda that a couple council members have asked to be put on, and I think that's it's absolutely worthwhile. I think the U.S. Postal Service is probably a little more on alert now because something happened and they need to fix it. I'm a little more confident because they are kind of on the watch now, but their responsiveness to this has been disappointing at best. Is there anything else, Mr. Peschel, you were looking for? You certainly got my blood pressure up there, Bob.
Sure. I'm wondering if this is something that we as a council could pass a resolution encouraging our national representatives in this area, Glenn Grothman, and even our state representatives, to encourage a further investigation or further communication as to the outcome of this. Just a way of expressing our dismay on behalf of our residents of the breakdown that took place related to this.
I would certainly support that, Bob.
I'm sorry, say that again?
I would certainly support that, putting forth the resolution, putting some timeframes, given that we haven't even received the courtesy of a response.
And I'm happy to write it for you. If that's,
Does anybody else want to weigh in? Councilmember Mulgrew.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. No, I would absolutely be supportive of that. I can tell you I myself had created 2 emails and decided to not hit the send button in that time frame as well, in terms of sending some messages off to my state representatives as well as my federal representatives, based upon my own personal frustrations. I'm one of the ones, as well as my wife, who have not received our ballots that we requested, our absentee ballots. So we needed to come down to City Hall, and we pre-voted, or early voted in City Hall on the last day we possibly could, because otherwise my house would not have voted in this last election. So I would be interested to see what Mr. Roloff would put pen to paper. I assume his words would probably be better than mine were when I was typing. But I would absolutely support something as well, just in terms of expressing our frustration with, A, what happened, but also from the point at which it happened to today, where communication has not been flowing. We have not received even a courtesy response, as Mr. Roloff alluded to. Those things are frustrating. And then it just shows a lack of either caring or a lack of awareness, or just a lack of professionalism in terms of the leadership at the U.S. Postal Service or any of those entities that are trying to help us, put an election on.
And
But I would
where are
absolutely-
the ballots?
But-
Where are they? Are they held up in some evidence room somewhere for the investigation?
Great
Where
question.
are they? They found them.
But also, one last thing though, through my process in this, in interacting with the city clerk's office, they've been nothing but fantastic at every turn. I know there was some bad press. Any press on this issue was negative. It seems as though a lot of whether social media posts or things like that were pretty negative in terms of the view of the clerk's office, at least locally. And I'd like to just make sure it's crystal clear that they did a fantastic job. The sole responsibility for those errors lies with the U.S. Postal Service, and where are those ballots? So until those things show up, where we know for certain where they are, I'd like to hear some continuous status updates as well. Adding this to the outstanding issues would be appropriate, to make sure we're updated on any messages you guys are receiving. But it goes into our next topic, and I know I'm getting long-winded here. But voting is essential here in America, and so to not know where those are as part of that process, that's frustrating. And to hear some specific comments directed, related to our city clerk's department in terms of, their ability to handle an election, sure is unprofessional. So to those listening, I'm hoping that this gets directed at the right person. But our clerk's office did everything that they possibly could to make sure this election went off as well as possible under the circumstances which they had no control over. So that's all I got on this one.
I just would,
Councilmember Allison Asby.
I just would like to concur on the sentiments of how I feel about our clerk's office and the volunteers that they had. Despite the heavy criticism that was definitely unwarranted, they and their volunteers were a class act the entire way.
I would just like to add that because I was gone for 14 days, it really took a huge effort on the entire organization. There were a lot of departments that helped out the clerk's office, so thanks to them.
Okay, so the next item is related to voting by mail for future 2020 elections. Council members Krause and Peschel asked to place this on. Councilmember Krause, do you want to start?
Sure, thank you, Mayor. Kind of just
I'm sorry,
piggybacking off the last one.
Deputy Mayor, my apologies.
What's that?
Deputy Mayor.
Oh, thank you.
We still have to
I
practice
didn't catch
this.
that. Okay.
Yes.
Myself and Councilmember Peschel have been discussing this over the last couple of weeks, and we just wanted to kind of get your guys' feedback on passing something comparable to the safe vote that was passed in Milwaukee to possibly mail out applications for absentee ballots to every registered voter in the city of Oshkosh. We don't know what the environment's going to be like in November. It could be better than it is now. It could be worse. They talk about a second wave, and it's just about getting the access and get the information out to the citizens to have the ability to vote. And if we can get ahead of this and get something in the plan to make sure that everybody's vote counts. Because I know there's some people that didn't even go out and vote that were waiting for those absentee ballots, and it's heartbreaking that in this country, some people didn't get to vote. So I was just interested in possibly doing that for the fall election. I know Mr. Peschel has some other ideas and things to add to the conversation, so I'll pass it on to him.
Councilmember Peschel?
Sure. So my hope is that we can create a program that sends out absentee applications to all registered voters in Oshkosh for the August primary as well as the November election. I would concur with Deputy Mayor Krause in the sense that there's things that we're not going to know about in regards to the current pandemic, where we may be, where we might not be in that process. And I think this is a way to encourage our residents to take the safest steps in order to engage them on their constitutional rights. So that's this is something that we were already doing. We were already encouraging our voters to vote by absentee. There was a large hiccup. Our hope is that that hiccup is taken care of for the August primary and for the fall election. So I'd encourage you guys to provide direction that that allows us to be able to send out those applications to encourage people to vote by mail.
And so just so I'm clear, what you're suggesting is mailing applications to all the registered voters to invite them to vote by absentee, correct?
Yeah, an application to get the ballot, to get the absentee ballot, yep.
But that would be mailed out to all of our registered voters? Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah.
Okay.
If I recall, and Mark or Pam, you guys, both of you can chime in at any time. In order to vote by absentee, you actually the resident has to request has to return an application for it. All we would be doing is making sure that all voters have that application and have the ability to fill it out if they wish, ignore it if they want, but to have that choice. Much easier than what they have now.
Oh, Councilmember Ford.
Yeah, I'm just thinking logistically, would it be something like the yard clipping things they throw in with the water bill? I mean, would it be, I guess I'm trying to think of what the work and financial.
My
burden
idea would be a dedicated, preferably like a bright color envelope.
Okay.
Clearly laid out where people know what they're getting, because I know sometimes it's very hard to go through the mail. Sometimes things get lost, so I'd hate for city residents' tax money going to something that would just get thrown in the garbage.
Okay.
Councilmember Allison Osby.
We have approximately 35,000 registered voters. How much would it cost to mail that envelope out just once?
Okay. A couple things I want to point out. August, the university is not in session, so we have that component with the university students. And then those individuals that perhaps have moved and haven't changed their address with the clerk's office, that is another component. So if we go with the 35,000 number to mail out the request to all those registered voters, including the envelopes and the postage, it's going to be roughly $20,000. And then once we receive those back, and we figured it on a percentage, because August is fairly low. I went back over the last 10 years, and it goes anywhere from 12% up to 25%, so we went with the higher number. If we go with that, it's roughly going to be about $11,000. That would be 9,000 voters that we would estimate that we would mail ballots to. So a total of 31,000.
And just
For
a
the
quick
August.
question. Does that 20,000 reference like the mailing of an application
Yes.
itself?
That's just the application. That's just the request.
Right. So then the additional would be for receiving the ballot and the return. is 43 cents, is that the correct amount that it costs to send the ballot out and 50 cents on the return?
It's roughly $1. We pay for both
Right, okay.
postage on both
Okay,
envelopes, yes.
okay.
So we factored all that into the estimates, but a little over 20,000. Just to do that.
Councilmember Allison Osby.
It's just a question. Is it possible to extend the period of time that people can come in and request an absentee ballot to be sent?
We will have the ballots in the office roughly around June 25th, 26th. So we could start in office voting at that time. But again, August is a lower number.
But if the idea, do I understand this, Councilmember Special and Deputy Mayor Krause, is to allow people not to physically have to go somewhere in advance? Is that where this is coming from, or what? Help me understand that, because if we say we'll just do early voting longer, for those who are concerned about, contact or transmission, is that what this is about, or?
The personal thought process I had was that it was just going to allow people the ability to be able to forecast how they're going to vote. I mean, if we can send out the applications to everybody, there won't be that, okay, how do I do this? How do I get this application? If we just get it in everybody's hands, they're more likely to vote absentee, which will let up the burden on the city to it at the polling stations. And maybe if we get a lot of applications back, they could forecast not having to have as many people working at these stations, which might save the taxpayers money. So it might compensate
City Clerk?
that.
We'd still need people at the stations because they'd have to process the absentee ballots that day.
Okay.
Councilmember Brower.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I'm going to just ask a clarifying question before I go to my comments. So either for Deputy Mayor Krause or Councilmember Peschel, and I think I just heard it there, I just want to make sure it's clear. So this is, the idea behind this is not to have in-person voting at all. It's to actually just increase the amount of potential absentee voters ahead of time, that we would still, under the idea at least at this moment, you would still have in-person voting on election day. Is that what I'm getting? Under the idea, at least?
Councilmember Peschel, do you want to take it, or should I?
Bob?
You can take it, Jake.
Okay. It was just on top of the in-person voting. Like I said, we don't know what's going to happen in November. I'm more of a supporter just having it for the general election because I know it is expensive to send out the applications, but it's just a huge unknown. I mean, I want everybody to have that opportunity to vote, and the easier we can make it to vote, the better.
So my concerns with, I've got several, but my concerns with blanket mailing absentee requests, the applications out, there's a couple problems with it at least. One, it does not reduce the potential for in-person contact, which at the moment, at least in the previous election, that people would have enjoyed, that may not have occurred as much. But doing so, sending those applications out, in this case, then just it does not help those that already participate in the process. It only encourages or increases the voter response, which is a political issue then. It's, by sending that out ahead of time, it's inducing more people to come into the process a little bit, which, don't take me wrong, I want more people involved in the electoral process. I think everyone should be required to, honestly, but it's a participation process, and I worry about fraud. I worry about, as City Clerk Oubre mentioned, several thousand ballots or applications being mailed to the dorms at UWO and or off-campus housing when those several thousand students may not be here, especially this fall, or this summer actually. They may not be here. And so one, where are those going to end up? And two, who's actually filling them out if they're coming back? If they're not there, if they're being sent, who's actually filling them out if they're coming back? Because there's potential that somebody's opening them up and mailing them back. If they're a registered voter already, that means they probably already have their ID on file to request that absentee ballot. So if they already have that on file, somebody's filling it out, they're getting a ballot back, even if they didn't request one, if somebody else is doing it on their behalf. I worry about voter fraud. I worry about about that. If the idea is to get rid of in-person voting, that's a noble idea. I don't have a problem discussing that as well. But I don't know that doing this necessarily helps that at all. It's just, it's encouraging more to participate in the process, but I'd like to congratulate the whole city staff. Every department was involved in trying to get out the notice, get out the vote in terms of voting absentee this last election. The amount of shares and likes and posts that were made from not just the clerk's office, but just every single department, it was exceptional. I don't know of any other community I've ever heard of that got on board with educating their people that do an absentee ballot. That was the amount of time, the amount of effort, that was great. So I wonder about the application process and blanketing the community with those application requests.
I want to ask you, did I understand you to say that this would not help reduce the in-person contact? Because in my head, and I don't know about others, but in my head, I'm thinking that the more people that participate via mail, the reduced number of people coming in physical contact, that maybe I'm missing something.
And maybe I worded it poorly. But if your thought process behind this is to get rid of in-person contact or in-person voting, then it should be all or nothing, I guess, is my thought on it a little bit. I guess that's my thought on that. If that's what you're looking to do, is to reduce that potential later on, then try to reduce it completely.
Councilmember Ford.
Yeah, I'm just wondering about cost. I mean, would it be significantly cheaper if we just piggybacked on a mailing we already do with some notification or some directions about how people can go about this so they know that this option exists?
I think it would be difficult to do it with like the water bills because you have registered voters, so you'd have to really cherry pick which ones they would go into the envelopes.
But if you were to send not an actual ballot application, but just like we do all the time in those things, just a notification, here's how you go about registering to vote, here's how you get an absentee ballot if you'd like to go that route. Would that be significantly cheaper?
I'm not sure how many utility users we have.
I guess my thought would be it wouldn't be postage costs then, it would simply be printing.
Printing, true.
Russ is formulating his answer as he's walking up as you.
I need a specific number, Russ.
No, we could certainly do that as far as a general notice. I guess one of the reasons why I came up during the discussion was just to kind of give a little light on where we're at in year-to-date numbers. We've already exceeded our postage account budget for the entire year, and we've had to do some internal budget amendments or transfers to cover postage up to this point. I'm just wanted to re-emphasize the point that, you know, whatever we decide to do, especially if it's another mailing, we're probably going to have to come back for a budget adjustment. Now, I know that shouldn't go into play in your decision, but it is a cost that's coming into play. But we certainly have the ability to do 2 inserts on each utility billing. Again, there's a little bit of a disconnect between the utility billing customer and a registered voter, but we could certainly emphasize the point of an absentee ballot through that mailing process.
And again, would this be reimbursable through the
To date, if you're asking about, and I'm jumping ahead, I should let you finish the question,
No.
I'm sorry, but I would assume you're talking about some of the FEMA money and those type of things. Election stuff is not covered, and it's not covered by any of the other CARES Act right now. That's one of the expenses we have to bear.
But it does fit into the unreimbursed COVID-19 figure that we still don't know.
That would be the council's choice, and I don't think either of us or Ms. Uberg want to say, let that factor in. I think how you want to conduct the election is something that you decide, and, you know, Pam gave you the number, roughly 30,000 for the August election and another 67,000 for the general election. So roughly about $100,000, give or take.
Which we would be spending the 67 anyway, it doesn't. right?
No, it depends on what in math, and we made assumptions in there, so we made the assumption that these would be the extra costs if we did this. We also assumed that if we mail them out, people are gonna, we're gonna get like I think 90%, we were assuming a 90% turnout for November, because presidential elections are much better, isn't it?
That's correct.
But wasn't our last presidential election like 30, or what was the percentage for that one?
Primary's different.
The primary is different than the governor's.
Yep.
Or the presidential.
The presidential.
So the
right.
last presidential, we had a 79.9% turnout.
Okay, okay. Councilmember Erickson, did you want to weigh in?
I mean, I think I'm supportive of looking into this. I think the more that we can, if we're providing the opportunity for people to have the choice of if they want to vote through mail or in person, we're at least creating some space for the in-person voting, that there's possibly less people at the polls. So, I mean, we don't know what kind of situation we'll be in for August or November. So I'm supportive of looking more into it.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Krause and then Councilmember Moverauer.
In a perfect world, having some flyers and water bills would be great, but I just think it'd be totally ineffective. People get their water bills, they hate paying their water bills, they throw away the stuff, they don't even look at the other stuff because they're so upset with the total that they're paying. I know it would be expensive to do it, but it's the whole idea of just making it available to people and to keep people the highest voter turnout possible is what everyone's goal should be. It shouldn't be a political talking point. If it's a Republican talking point, a lot of the older citizens are Republicans, so it would benefit them the most if they're harder to get to vote, or if they're worried about the virus. If it's worse in November, I think it's beneficial to everybody to have that opportunity, and the more people we can get to vote, it benefits everybody.
Councilmember Allison Osby.
Thank you. So I think the original question that I had was just, can we, when is the soonest that somebody can actually physically call the clerk's office to have a ballot sent?
Okay, you cannot call and request it over the phone, or you cannot pick it up and.
You have to go online.
You either have to request it in writing, go to My Vote, you can email us, as long as we have a trail in case there would be a recount as to why the clerk mailed a ballot to Citizen A.
So when does My Vote open up then to allow?
It's already open, and
It
we
is
are
open.
receiving applications daily right now.
Okay. I guess I'm in favor of keeping things as they are. I think, why throw the baby out with the bathwater? I think where this kind of came from was, obviously we experienced something that we've never seen in a lifetime. And based on how things went in Milwaukee, I absolutely 100% understand why they're doing what they're doing, given the situation that they had with their voting, but Oshkosh is not Milwaukee. I think the sentiment that Ms. Erickson and Mr. Krause and Mr. Peschel have, I think obviously is a great one. I think it's a valid one, but I am not in favor of mailing them out due to the reasons that the clerk gave. And also, again, I think there's a lot of options, and if we want to get the message out, I agree with Mr. Krause. I don't know putting them in the water bill is going to work, because typically people don't even see the stuff that we put in there already. And would it make more sense to maybe use some dollars, not a lot, but perhaps put something in the Herald a couple of times? That seems to be incredibly effective, as well as we know people do go online to the Northwestern, and what a banner ad on their front page make a lot of sense. Those are two things that I do know that when there has been community word or community items that need to get out to the public, that those have been certainly two great mediums.
I guess the only thing that's kind of sticking in my head about this is, along with Milwaukee, Brown County saw some challenges, also a number of other communities. And if the science is accurate in projecting that, with the onset of flu season and potentially the rebound or that second wave of the virus on top of flu season, I would hate for us to wait until the last few weeks and then say, oh, we should do this, when potentially things are rather thick. And people end up experiencing this a second time, and the inability to, because they're trusting us that we're going to make that possibility. I do think that, to Councilmember Allison Osby's point, would we be as effective and save some money by running a number of ads in the Herald, given that they have a 25,000 plus distribution? While there would be costs associated with those, larger ads run numerous times, maybe not to the same level, would we achieve the same effect? And that's just kind of a question mark for me. Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, I read the Herald every week. I mean, it's a great addition to the city, but just because it's mailed to somebody doesn't mean that they actually read it. It could just end up in the garbage can as well. I'm just going to propose that we can take a council roll call to see if we can get it on the agenda. There's been a lot of great discussion. I mean, Mr. Peschel's in favor of the August and the November. I'm just in favor of the November. So if we could just get it on an agenda and let the chips fall how they will at that point.
All right, can we come back for your motion? I missed Councilmember Mugrauer, my apologies.
No issue. Before a quick comment, City Clerk, do you have any stats you want to provide, or you can, in terms of absentee requests that you mailed out, that were requested and mailed out this election compared to a previous one that may have been a similar one? In terms of, what I'm looking for is, what was the increase that could be attributed maybe to this election? In this, it was a unique one, of course, but maybe what type of increase we saw?
This election truly was unique. I believe that with our organization, the push that we did the last couple weeks prior to the election was very successful, because we mailed out 10,795 absentee ballots. And when I pull information from past elections, November of 2016, we mailed out 9,084. In November of 18, we mailed out 4,903. So we really did do quite a push in those couple weeks. I believe that if we would start to do a push in June, July, and try to get those voters thinking about it further in advance, that we would be successful in it.
And that's actually where I was going to kind of go with it. So thanks for leading us there. Was the efforts that you and the city put forth to me, they seemed successful. They seemed to drive interest and participation. And I would absolutely be all in favor of giving Mark direction, or City Manager Roloff direction, to encourage staff to do so again for the next two election cycles, the August and the November, that we do those same things. I know other communities are not doing that. Maybe they'll follow along, but I'm so thankful that you guys took that initiative to try to encourage and increase that participation that way. I think there are ways to encourage those things. That's definitely what you guys did, and the multiple mediums you used was very effective. But I guess the way a comment was made, and I don't remember which council member made it, this would allow more to participate. I caution that, or I have concern with that type of a sentiment. Everyone has the ability to participate right now. Whether they're choosing to or not, that's their choice. Voting is a participation activity. You have to want to do it. And so, and the city of Oshkosh has led the way in many different ways, in terms of absentee voting, early voting, city hall voting when you opened up the Saturday type of stuff. Oshkosh is leading the way on many things, in many ways to get people to participate in that process. So I think to use this as a sentiment that this will, to get more to participate, they have to want to participate in the process already, is my thing, that they already have the ability, they have to choose to. And so the current process where they connect with the city clerk's office in one of the multiple ways is that process that they need to use, and it's a good process.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Mugrauer. So Deputy Mayor Krause wanted to make a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to take a roll call to see if we can get an agenda item on the first council meeting in May to discuss it further and come up with some ideas of having mail-in applications for the November election.
So you're asking for
So-
further discussion, and you've seconded it, Paul, Councilmember Peschel?
I don't,
Yes.
All right.
Quick point of clarification.
Yeah.
The agenda item I'm
Yeah.
looking for is the proposal to have mail-in or a mailed application to every Oshkosh registered voter for the November election.
Are you looking for a resolution?
Yeah, to give city direction to mail out applications.
Councilmember Peschel, was that clear?
Yes, that was clear.
Okay. So are you seconding that clarified request? Okay.
So
All
for
right.
clarification, we would like an agenda item, which is a resolution on the May 12th meeting for mailing requests to all the registered voters for the November 2020 election.
An application mailed to every registered voter.
The request, yes,
Yep.
for an application.
Mhm.
we need a roll call, just ask. We have four people that are interested in that.
I'm going to call the roll. Or, I'm sorry, clerk, please take the roll.
Mugrower,
No.
Erickson,
Aye.
Peschel,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Allison Osby,
No.
Rousey,
Aye.
Palmieri,
Aye.
carried 5-2.
Okay. That wraps up council discussion and direction to city manager. I believe Councilmember Ford has a statement he'd like to make.
Yeah, real quickly, we have a closed session later today dealing with the property where the food co-op is going in, and I'm on the site selection team, and that predates my service to the council, so I will be recusing myself from that closed session.
Thank you. All right, next is city manager announcements and statements.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. For the new council members, we normally have what's called status of outstanding issues. It's items that council's asked to just kind of keep updated on, sort of keeps me honest about keeping forwarding, following through on items. I don't have a lot to report on what's on the list tonight, although with this free student busing is probably the one. I did forward some draft language to Superintendent Cartwright. I have not heard back from her based on what I forwarded her, but we did have a discussion. So waiting that language, and I know that we're waiting the fundraising efforts that are due on June 1st on that. So that's really all I have there. And then from the discussion tonight, I'm going to add for next meeting assistance to landlords and tenants relative to item 31 on our agenda, and the status on missing ballots, which was item 32 on our agenda. So I add those two and just keep them in there to keep you going. And for our new council members, if you have anything you'd like me to track on this sheet, let us know. Diane and I update it every 2 weeks.
I just had one thing that must have fallen off the outstanding issues, and that's our creation of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee.
I don't recall it being on there, but it will be next time. Thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Councilmember Guerrero.
Thank you. City Manager Roloff, I don't necessarily need Mr. Robbie to come up here, but you want to just make sure we're aware of the status of the Oshkosh Ave Bridge. Obviously, I think it opened to navigational traffic on time, but just, I know we're 6 weeks from their anticipated and hopeful completion, but how are they progressing in terms of getting that bridge open for our residents and businesses over there?
Yes, as you indicated, they did get the bridge open for navigational season. I have personally witnessed the bridge opening. I'm not sure if it was for boat traffic or for other reasons, but as I drove by it earlier today, I did see it was in the open position. My latest update that I have received from the DOT staff is that they are still on schedule for their their mid-June contract date. The contractor is working on deck work and also adjacent concrete approach work. The same subcontractor that is doing the concrete approach work for the state project is the same subcontractor that's doing the city work immediately adjacent to the state project. So a lot of that concrete will be going down in one pour. It's just the state will measure to here and the city will keep measuring to the limits from there. So we were fortunate that it was the same paving contractor working for both of us.
Appreciate it.
And after they get the deck work done, they have to wait for full cure out for 28 days before they can apply the polymer coating over the deck as well. So there will be a period of time where it may not look like anything is happening, but they are waiting for concrete to cure, which is kind of like watching paint dry.
Appreciate the update. Thank you.
And that's all I have relative to that. And then as far as COVID-19 update, Chief Stanley here for just a brief update on some of the things we're working on. But the numbers are working. We're pleased with that, but you know, we're continuing efforts on a daily basis. Chief?
Yeah, thank you, sir. Madam Mayor, council members, yeah, that's still very pleased to report that the numbers in Winnebago County remain quite low. You know, that we're not seeing the rise that some of our neighboring counties and other areas around the state are. That still very concerning numbers relative to number of hospitalized cases and deaths, and you know, more positive cases around the state. So. We said we've been very fortunate in this community that we have not been as impacted negatively as many others. You know, I know at this point we probably all have some quarantine or isolation, sheltering fatigue, and that's stressful. And we've talked about that at length tonight. But you know, we need to be cautious that we continue to be vigilant so that we don't see that rise, you know, and risk our population. And so. As the city manager indicated, you know, we still continue to be vigilant on monitoring trends and working with our partnering agencies such as the health department and neighboring communities. Still working on plans, you know, as we discussed earlier at the meeting, you know, there is some uncertainty about what the shelter-in-place orders and, you know, the Badger bounce back plan will look like. You know, that we're working on planning for what does bouncing back look like. So I'll open it up to whatever questions you might have.
I did receive an email, and I think other council members may have too, asking us what the transmission rate was. And I did refer them over to the COVID-19 hotline. Not sure where I can send somebody, if that's something that's shareable. And then the other question in that email was, while our numbers have remained low, has our testing increased yet?
Yeah, so I was just looking at some report on testing, you know, that statewide the number of testing facilities has increased since the initial onset, you know, outbreak of COVID, and that the number of tests being processed a day continues to increase in the state. So just this week, it looks like they went from 2,000 tests a day that they were processing in the state to almost 2,700 tests a day. You know, so the processing rate continues to increase as there's more and more options available.
Anyone else have questions for Chief? I guess this is kind of both to Chief and City Manager Roloff. My question is, you know, at what point would we be looking at that second meeting in May as a time to consider, you know, whether or not there's still the need for the emergency order here at the city level?
Yeah, I think very premature at this point to put much thought to that, you know, because there is so much uncertainty nationwide and worldwide. I mean, we're still seeing increasing numbers, you know, that we have just crested 1 million cases in the United States, you know, which is by far the most of any single nation. You know, over 1/3 of the cases worldwide are in this country. That there is still so much unknown about what this will look like, you know, and if I could predict that, I'd probably be the richest person in the world and certainly get lots of of television time as well. I mean, when you see all the competing discussions from experts, in the media of what does this look like? Will it last another week? Will it last 18 months? Will there be a resurgence? I mean, you can just flip through the channels on the TV or click on the internet websites and you're going to get a different answer, every second of the day. So I think at this point, further information and testing and research needs to be done before we'd want to consider closing out that declaration. And we'll probably keep that declaration open even for some time afterward, because as we work on demobilization is the term we use in the Emergency Operations Center, you work on some of those transitional things of getting things back open, doing some of those cost recovery things, that many times you want to still have that declaration of an emergency open so that you can continue to support some of those functions and continue to seek reimbursement for them.
So does that work on an Oshkosh bounce back, turn the dial kind of transition? And I guess since it's council's, at council's decision whether we continue that or not. I know some cities put a hard date and maybe, that works for them, but we tried to give some flexibility there. But I guess given the information that we have now, and given the projection for the lifting of the state order, would we consider having that discussion on that agenda item in the second meeting or the first meeting of May?
I don't think it would be appropriate to have a discussion about closing. I just wanted to point out on the agenda tonight, the council finally closed the emergency on the computer virus back on January 28th. So I would say no to that specific question, but I would elaborate a little more and say that doesn't mean that we don't start looking at things that we should scale back. We opened our emergency operations center a full week before the state issued their stay-at-home order. So we recognize there were things that we needed to do as a city, and I think we'll need to continue to do. What I would do is continue to come back at every meeting. This isn't even on outstanding issues. This is going to be a regular place on this agenda until this emergency is over. For example, things like board and commission meetings. I could see us relaxing that before we end the emergency type of thing. And those are the things that it's going to be a feel. And I think every 2 weeks you can have that discussion about, I think it's time, Mark, that we let the board and commission meetings get back to normal. We're doing CIP meetings in the upcoming month because we want to, it's all about continuity of government. But at a certain point, we can relax that, and then we can look at other things that we can relax. So for us to transition back to normalcy, I think that starts, around that time. But does that mean we end the emergency? No, I wouldn't say so.
What would be the rationale for keeping the emergency open if the orders are lifted at the state level?
Well, I guess some of it has to do with the federal reimbursement and the cost recovery, because when you look at it from an emergency management perspective, that let's take out the pandemic and say a tornado. That tornado comes through town, heaven forbid. Once the tornado goes through town, the common sense would say, or your intuition would say, the emergency's over. But until you're back to that 100% recovered state, you many times will keep that emergency open. So there's really no sense of urgency to close out the emergency declaration, whereas it may have some adverse effects. Secondarily, like I alluded to earlier, that if we do see a resurgence, that we start to see continued problems or new problems, then we would have to go through this whole process of declaring the emergency again. So by no means do we want to extend this emergency any longer than we have to. And staff will give you a very well thought out and well prepared and well rationaled recommendation on when it is time, much like we did with closing out the cyber attack, emergency declaration of, okay, we know we're past that emergency, we're very confident in what has happened, we've taken all the measures we need to, it's no longer a threat, we've done all the cost recovery things that we're going to do, all the purchases associated with that are done, let's close it out.
So as I understood it, when we created this, and perhaps council, you can weigh in on this if you choose, it was my understanding that, we left that decision to council, and obviously we respect, staff's input and insights and reasons. But I'm trying to understand what an example would be of a continued emergency beyond if the state.
If we close the emergency, FEMA reimbursements stop right at that moment.
Oh,
The council
okay.
wants
That's what
to-
I'm trying to understand.
Yeah,
Something
that's,
Okay.
so, so that's the primary reason. We're done with the computer emergency, for example. We've got everything filed for reimbursement. It's not FEMA eligible, but it's insurance eligible. We've gone through everything that we can possibly go through. So we would keep that going for that purpose. And, if council felt at some point that we were done and if we're waiting for $1 of reimbursement to come in, we could have a discussion about closing it and writing off the dollar. But if we have the potential for reimbursement, we don't want to lose that window of opportunity. But that doesn't mean we can't close other elements. The example I used with the board and commission meetings, I could see that being a fairly early closure before we close the entire emergency out, for example.
Well, especially given that we're allowing them to participate virtually.
Right.
We might be able to extend that beyond too as well. Does anybody else have anything else they want to say there? All right, then I'm going to turn it over to Deputy Mayor for a motion to go into closed session.
I move that the Common Council convene in a closed session to discuss bargaining options, strategies, parameters, and terms related to the negotiation of an agreement for the redevelopment of the Marion Road redevelopment sites H, I, and J pursuant to section 19.851E of the Wisconsin State Statutes where competitive bargaining reasons require a closed session.
Second?
All right, please take the roll.
Muglauer?
Aye.
Erickson?
Aye.
Peschel?
Aye.
Ford?
Present.
Ellison Osby?
Aye.
Crozey?
Aye.
Palmieri?
Aye.
Carried 6, 1 present.
All right, so
Motion to
we
adjourn.
will take a motion to adjourn. Second, somebody? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, so is 5 minutes enough for everybody, or, I don't know.